One of the things that we talked about in the past, and you mentioned it briefly today, was the concept of the four asset classes. So, if you don't mind, explain the concept of the four asset classes to building wealth.
Yeah. So the first thing is I want to kind of give my for clarity of like how I use the term, because now there's so with the information age that we're in with social media with the internet. If anyone Googles or internet searches like asset classes, you're going to get a list of four, six, seven, eight, nine, five asset classes, right? So I want to be very specific to the way I learned it like a while back, because there's really four asset classes, and then I believe now it's being called the four asset classes in when we're talking about wealth creation, right? But they're really the four asset classes, right? So that's the way I learned it, right? So the first one, and this is not in the order; these are just the four, right? So the one that's most common is paper assets. So that's where most people will have stocks, mutual funds, retirement accounts are paper assets, CDs are paper assets. What that means is basically an asset that you're holding on paper. So that means you may not necessarily have the money, but it's basically on paper. That would be the balance sheet that we talked about earlier. That would be what that is, right? So that's paper assets. That's where most people have their money. And then the second one is where most people would aspire, which is basically, again, not in order, just a way to remember it is like most people want to have a business. And then for believers, they're really in, like Dr. Miles Monroe says, that he says, we're really built to move from employment to deployment. So because when you're employed, you're working for someone else's vision. So you're never going to reach your full potential. So you're there to deploy. That means to take your gifting that you were created for in order to serve it out. And then that's your actual, purpose in life. And that's to deploy out your gifting. So employment to deployment. But in the physical world that we live in, that would be in the category of business. So that's where you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, you're business owner. Robert Kiyosaki calls it small business, big business. But it's basically an owner of a business. And the way I define it is clearly as an asset, not just like in the United States, a lot of people have LLCs. All they are pass-through entities.